Warm greetings from the High 10. This is Crime Vault. Thank you for joining me. Today's story, based on a true story, is pertaining to Shanae Wesley, a 23-year-old student at the time, nursing student and a mom, who spent the night out with friends on the eve of Halloween 2012. Sadly, on that evening, this young lady was brutally assaulted, sexually assaulted, killed, set a fire ablaze in her apartment with a small child left in the apartment with her. Thank you for joining me.
A woman was found dead Wednesday morning after an apartment fire in Marietta that officials have deemed suspicious. Firefighters arrived at the Waterstone Apartments just before 7 a.m. to find a downstairs apartment engulfed in flames. Fire officials say a neighbor had rescued a small child from the apartment before crews arrived. After putting out the blaze, firefighters did a search and found a woman in her 30s dead inside the apartment. Fire officials declined to elaborate on why investigators are calling the fire suspicious. The child was taken to the hospital for minor to moderate injuries.
We woke up to somebody beating down our door, and we live on the upstairs unit adjacent to it. And as we opened our front door, the room fully engulfed with smoke. And we exited our apartment and came downstairs. We couldn't decipher where the fire was coming from. And as we exited the building, we could see that the bedroom on the downstairs floor was fully engulfed. And Jason, the neighbor directly upstairs, went into the neighbor's unit and pulled the small child out of the house, out of the apartment. And this about 5 or 6 year old boy rescued the little boy, and then the police came.
For reporter Sarah Burge,
All right, everybody. That is a news clipping many years ago pertaining to Shanae Wesley, who was 23 years of age at the time, a young mother and a nursing student. This is a very tragic story of a young lady, life gone, snuffed out, because somebody decided on that fateful night that her life was not worthy, not valuable. Thank you for joining me. One second. Hello, everybody in the chat.
She could sing like no other person I've ever heard on this planet. Christina Aguilera was her idol, and it was someone she sounds like spot on, sounds just like her. We would rehearse these routines and we would go downstairs and perform it in front of our parents, and she would steal the show, blow everyone away with her voice. And of course, me and my cousins were looking at her like a little salty, like, where'd this voice come from? Like, you stole the show. Like, no one wants to see us anymore as soon as she opens her mouth. But it gives you chills. Her voice would give you chills. It was remarkable. She could have been anything. She could have been in the gospel, in the choir. She could have, I know she would have touched people. At the time, Bullpen was the popular place to go. It was an 18 and up club, so it was pretty much always packed with the younger crowd and the older crowd and just a mix of everybody. I arrived 9:30, 10 at Bullpen, and I was there for a while. And then I'm like, okay, I have work in the morning. So that's when I decided to leave. That's when I seen Shanae right there in the front of the line. It was just exciting to see her and just being able to catch up. While we're chatting and just kind of lingering, Aaron met a few people in the line, Alfred, Nate, and Ja'Cory. They're really nice, laid-back people. Things seem to be very respectful. But me and Shanae just wanted to kind of, keep catching up, keep talking. We did talk about Ryan a lot. At the time, Ryan was her boyfriend, and I'm not too sure, what they were going through. I think she was maybe having problems with him, but I know that she did have situations where they were broken up and back on and broken up again. That night, they were out together. I think her being able to have that night out was a stress reliever, just to get out, have a drink, and just get her mind off of that.
As I entered through the main entrance into the living room, I could tell from the burn patterns that the fire had actually came from the master bedroom. We did find the severely burned body located in the master bedroom north wall, located on the floor. The body was intact, but portions of the torso had been burned through at the time. The identification of the body wasn't really possible. I was pretty sure it was a female victim because the victim had no clothing on, from what we can tell. It wasn't a very pretty sight at that time. And looking at all the fire indicators that we found, we ruled out basically all accidental sources, including smoking. As we looked at the bed, take the mattress off, and we get to the floor, and we collected all the fire debris. Through that, we came up with a bunch of glass fragments, not something that I would normally see underneath the bed. It was determined to be a bottle of ignitable liquid that could have actually fueled a fire. This was a little more than some apartment fire. It looked like fire being used as a cover-up to a homicide. Our written goal as a fire department is to determine the origin and cause of a fire 90% of the time. So when we first entered the master bedroom, we started our observations, looking at different burn patterns, trying to determine within the room where the fire originated from. Fire has a tendency to burn upward and outward, so as it's burning, it creates a V-type pattern. It flows a lot like water. It flows with a path of least resistance. When it hits the ceiling, it's going to bank down. That's where you get the intense heat that comes down. I did notice on the mattress itself there was a great amount of annealing. You apply heat to a metal, in this case it was a mattress spring, the actual mattress spring will lose spring tension, so as the heat gets there, the springs will sag. It was just at one corner of the bed, which we determined the annealing. Again, we're layering that down, so we take this mattress off, we relocate that to a different room and basically get it out of our way. And we get to the floor, and underneath the bed, we split that into 4 quadrants. And we collected all the fire debris from beneath the bed. At that time, all that we had was glass fragments. One of our detectives spent time and was able to piece the bottle back together. It was several days. We looked at this being used as a potential ignitable liquid that was put on the bed to get the fire going. And as the fire burned, the fragments burned through, fell through the box springs, and ended up on the floor beneath the bed. Now we can pinpoint where the fire was.
Erin was very helpful. She went through the whole night. She explains that they met 3 guys while they're in line at the bullpen waiting to get in.
We just pretty much all met them right there and getting out of the club.
What was the age of these guys?
I think they're all about 20.
They spend time together at the club. When they go to leave, there's an after party, and Shanae invited them to come back to her place.
And she's like, all right, let me take my car so I can go home and pick up my baby.
Hang on for a second. Any water or anything?
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay. Hang back.
Shanae told these 3 guys, I live at the Waterstone Apartments, but she didn't tell them her apartment number. Shanae and Aaron leave the club, and they go and pick up Malachi from the babysitters, and then Shanae drops off Aaron at her apartment, and then Shanae heads home. At her house, Aaron gets a phone call from one of the guys asking what Shanae's apartment number is. Aaron calls Shanae and finds out that Shanae doesn't want them to come over anymore. She's had changed plans, and Aaron falls asleep. So after speaking with Aaron, we're of course like, who are these three guys? They definitely were at the apartment complex. They're definitely looking for Shanae's apartment. To me, it was, what if? What if they did find her apartment? What if they did go to that apartment? Invited, not invited, who knows?
That's a synopsis of a terrible event, Halloween 2012, pertaining to Shanae. I will now bring you commentary pertaining to what actually happened to her on that fateful night. Thank you for joining me. This is Crime Vault, an extension of Everyday Shenanigans. Shanae Wesley, a 23-year-old single mom and nursing student, spent a night out with friends on the eve of Halloween 2012. The next morning, her severely burned body was found in Marietta, California, home by firefighters after a blaze tore through the apartment. Shanae's 3-year-old son, Malachi, had been rescued from the inferno by an off-duty fireman who lived upstairs in the complex, reported to Press Enterprise. Investigators examined the scene and determined that the fire wasn't accidental. While searching, they recovered Shanae's cell phone and a broken bottle whose contents appeared to have been used as an accelerant. It looked like fire had been used as a cover-up to a homicide. Steve King, fire investigator for the City of Marietta Fire Department, told Murdered by Morning series on Oxygen. Shanae had been so badly burned, she was identified through dental records. Her car was missing from the complex's parking lot. A forensic pathologist who handled the case said that strangulation or suffocation seemed likely. The extent of her burn injuries made a precise determination impossible. The pathologist found out Shanae had no soot in her lungs, which tells us that she was dead before the fire started, said Sergeant John Therian, a Marietta Police Department detective. Despite the severe burns, the investigators were able to determine that Shanae had been sexually assaulted. They collected a trace amount of DNA evidence that could possibly help lead to the killer. Investigators traced Shanae's movements on the night of October 30th. They learned that she had accompanied a female friend to Bullpen Burgers and Links, a popular local establishment, according to Patch.com. Shanae had made plans to continue the party after the club closed at 2 a.m. with one of her girlfriends and 3 young men who'd been there, detectives learned. But it turned out that Shanae changed her mind about that. Investigators interviewed the trio of men and collected DNA samples and cleared them from the case. At the same time, a child social worker spoke with 3-year-old Malachi. He mentioned that his mom's ex-boyfriend, Ryan, had been at the apartment. Ryan spoke with detectives and told them he was nowhere near the Waterstone apartment, but carpooling to a technical college on the morning of the fire. The alibi checked out. King agreed to be swabbed for DNA, which cleared him from suspicion. Detectives also focused on Shanae's phone records for clues. They found that after 3 a.m., Shanae had spoken to Rodney Piper, a friend whom she had dated in the past. That phone number turned out to be the most important evidence in this entire case, investigators said. Piper, who was with another man he knew as KB, told police that he had been with Shanae in the early morning hours before the fire. He had run into her at the Bullpen, and they made plans to get together after it closed, which explained why Shanae had changed her plans about inviting the other 3 men over. Rodney told us that Shanae wanted him to bring a friend because her friend was going to be there said Philip Gomez, supervisor of the investigation division, Marietta Police Department. Rodney thought the intention was to have a double date. En route to Shanae's apartment, Piper told detectives he bought condoms and vodka. When they arrived, they learned that Shanae's girlfriend's plans had changed, and Shanae was there with only Malachi. She told Piper and his friend her son was sleeping in his room. Piper told authorities that he and Shanae went into her bedroom and that he told KB to wait for him. Piper said he and Shanae had sex and that he wore a condom. When he returned to the living room, KB was gone. He said he waited for about 20 minutes before leaving. By then, it was around 4:30 a.m. Investigators determined that KB was Marquise Denzel McClown, a wanted parolee at large with a prior felony conviction for burglary in 2008. Police tracked McClown to his girlfriend's apartment in nearby Hemet. As police surveyed the residence, Shanae's car was found in a church parking lot less than 2 miles from McClown's girlfriend's home. Fabric on the driver's seat had been cut out, and the exterior had been doused with bleach. "It's not trying to hide a stolen vehicle," said Therian. "This guy is trying to hide a murder." McClown was taken into custody for the parole violations and questioned about Shanae's final hours. McClown told investigators that Shanae wanted to have sex with him and Piper. He said that he had sex with her first and didn't use a condom or remove his shirt. He alleged that Piper had sex with her after that, according to Murdered by Morning. McClown also claimed that he got a ride with a man named Ernest, but his girlfriend told authorities that she had actually picked him up around 8 a.m., 6 blocks from where the car was dumped. When pressed, McClown claimed he had lied about hitching a ride because he feared being busted for car theft. He admitted to taking Shanae's keys and going to a Walmart that morning. Security footage showed him at the store at approximately 7 a.m., buying bleach and an X-Acto knife. That was just a half hour after the fire was reported. Police called Piper back in for another interview. He said that McClown's account was a complete lie. He allowed detectives to inspect his body for scratches, and they found none. But when the investigators examined McClown's body, it was covered with scratches. Although he originally said he never took off his shirt, he changed his story and said the marks occurred during sex. McClown was charged with murder, and his DNA was a match for the evidence found on Shanae's body. Investigators believe that he took Shanae's keys and returned to the apartment after Piper left. "We believe Marquise entered the bedroom and found Shanae sleeping," said Gomez. "He decided to attack her, rape her, and murder her." After his trial in 2015 and receiving a life sentence for raping and killing Shanae Wesley, McClown, 25, didn't express regret, according to the Press Enterprise. This commentary is currently running on the Oxygen Network, and it was uploaded May 7th. This is the story pertaining to Shanae, a young woman snuffed out very early in life. Shanae Wesley was 23 years of age at the time of her sexual assault and murder. I will now bring you commentary pertaining to the suspect. Thank you for joining me. Defendant expresses no regret in rape slaying. A Hemet man who was sentenced to life in prison Friday, November 13th for raping and killing a Marietta woman and then setting her apartment ablaze with her 3-year-old inside said he didn't regret what he had done to the victim, a prosecutor said. "It's unusual for a defendant to make a statement that is that recalcitrant and heartless," Prosecutor Daniel DeLemon said. Marquise Denzel McClown, 25 at that time, made his statement after friends and family of McClown's victim, 23-year-old Shanae Wesley, talked about how they were impacted by the crime. This was a time and place for the victim's family to talk about the crime and how it affected them in their lives, and he couldn't let them have that moment, DeLemon said. McGlown had pleaded guilty to rape, murder, attempted murder, arson, and theft on Wesley's car in July and was scheduled to be sentenced August 7th. He shocked the courtroom when he told Superior Court Judge John Monterosso that he was pressured into a plea deal and that he wanted to take his plea back. But after consulting with his defense attorney, Stephen R. Swigert, who could not be reached for comment Tuesday, McGlown decided not to pursue a motion to retract his plea deal, and sentencing proceeded Friday. McGlown was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, per his plea agreement, DeLemon said. McGlown was charged in connection with Wesley's October 31st, 2012 death. Prosecutors said McGlown had met Wesley through a mutual friend at a Temecula bar. After hanging out at the bar, both went to Wesley's apartment. They said McGlown took Wesley's keys while he was there and later returned, raping and killing her before setting her apartment on fire. Wesley's 3-year-old son was inside the burning apartment. He was rescued by a neighbor who was an off-duty firefighter. The Press Enterprise is the source for this said information. So it says here that the suspect met Wesley through a mutual friend at a Temecula bar. After hanging out at the bar, both went to Wesley's apartment. The most interesting thing about this commentary is that the commentary I brought to you by Oxygen says that the other guy, Piper, brought him to the apartment as thinking it was a double date. So what is really the truth pertaining to these people meeting? Because now this information here is conflicting, saying that McGlown had met Wesley through a mutual friend at a Temecula bar. After hanging at the bar, both went to Wesley's apartment. But yet, as I said, in the Oxygen commentary, it says that a guy that she dated before brought this suspect, McGlown. So what is the truth? The part of the story that's interesting to me is the fact that Shanae would agree to have sex in the apartment with another person there. That's what I find baffling. I also find it interesting that she didn't want the other 3 guys to come. When the friend called her to tell her that one was asking about where she lived, she said she had to change of plan. So that means she obviously didn't have none of those guys' telephone numbers. And that means her friend had the telephone number, the woman who you hear in the interrogation at the beginning of this live. So obviously the woman didn't tell the guys where Shanae lived. And she didn't show up because the commentary also says that Shanae dropped her off, Aaron. So I'm kind of confused that when the guys got there, the 2 guys, Piper and McGlown, if I'm saying that correctly. I'm going to go back because there's something off here. I'll make sure I'm not saying the wrong guys' names. Okay. One moment. Yes. From her phone records, they found that after 3 a.m., Shanae had spoken to Rodney Piper, a friend whom she had dated in the past. Phone number turned out to be the most important evidence in the case. Piper, who was with another man he knew as KB, told police that he had been with Shanae in the early morning hours before the fire. He had run into her at Bullpen, and they made plans to get together after it closed, which explained why Shanae had changed her plans. So is it perhaps that KB was with Piper at Bullpen too? And then they exchanged, Piper and Shanae, information for him to come visit her, because obviously they say she dated him in the past. So was KB also there? And that is what this other article is saying. He met her at the bar. So was he also the suspect with Rodney when they met Shanae? And Shanae decided she wanted Piper and his friend, who he was calling KB at the time, to come over, but not the other three guys. However, the situation went down. As I said, the baffling part of the story is that the two guys go to the apartment, but there's only Shanae there with her 3-year-old boy child. So I find it strange that a young lady would want to entertain a man in her house with another guy present. That's the part that was strange to me. And you have to also remember she did drop off Aaron allegedly first after the club. So then that means she knew Aaron didn't want a double date with the other guy or even hang out or whatever the arrangement was supposed to be. So what I find interesting is if she indeed dropped the friend off first, why didn't she call Piper to say, hey, don't bring your friend because my friend will not be there? See, this is where the story is grainy to me. Very, very grainy. Because here is where Rodney says, he told us that Shanae wanted him to bring a friend because her friend was going to be there, said Philip Gomez, supervisor of the investigation division, Marietta Police Department. Rodney thought the intention was to have a double date, quote unquote. And then there, Piper goes to the store to get vodka condoms for his date with her. When they arrived, they learned that Shanae's girlfriend's plans had changed. And Shanae was there with only Malachi. She told Piper and his friend her son was sleeping in his room. Piper tells authorities that he and Shanae went into her bedroom and he told KB to wait for him. Piper said he and Shanae had sex and that he wore a condom. When he returned to the living room, KB was gone. He said he waited for about 20 minutes before leaving. By then, it was around 4:30. So as I said, in 2012, we know there were cell phones, landlines. So why did Shanae not call her friend to tell the guy, hey, my girlfriend is not coming. She changed her mind. This is where that is also strange to me. Because as I said, she dropped the friend off first before the guys ever made it to the apartment, Piper and KB, who we now know as Mr. McGlown. So why didn't you call the guy to tell him, don't bring your friend? And as you hear Mr. McGlown, who's a narcissist, creep, bum, made it out to be at first that it was going to be Shanae having sex with both of them. But then he had to change the story once they decided to check his body and they found scratches on him, but not the Piper guy. What happened in that apartment? Was he jealous because he didn't have a date? Had he committed these type of crimes before? Had he raped and assaulted other women before? You also hear in this commentary that he had a girlfriend, and where he dumped the car was not too far from her apartment. The fact that he cut out fabric from the seat in the car, her car. Why? What did he leave behind that he knew would be linked to him? Because if there's no proof that they knew each other, just acquaintance, why did you think he'd be implicated? Or perhaps you thought that once they found her body, phone records, they would link her to Mr. Piper, your friend, acquaintance, and he would tell whatever happened and who he was with, which would implicate you being with him that night at the bullpen and also at her apartment waiting while they got done having sex. And you was slick and sly. You got angry, possibly at your friend and Miss Shanae, because you didn't have a date. Nobody was giving you any sex. So you decided, steal her keys. Where were her keys? Laying on the table, counter. Obviously, they were out because Mr. McGlown stole the keys. Stole the keys, left, went somewhere. See, this is a very diabolical story. Then he returned back after his friend is gone. So that means, naturally, his friend is the one who was driving and had his own car. So he lied and waited till his friend was gone. And then he came back, opened this woman's door with her key. She has no idea he's coming back. Anyone's coming back. He goes into her bedroom, sexually assaults her, possibly choked her, suffocated her. I'm assuming possibly beat her up as well. From what has been said in the commentary, the Oxygen Network, and sets her ablaze. Apartments are set ablaze. No regard for her or her child being in another room asleep. Yes, there was a 3-year-old boy child left behind, saved by an upstairs neighbor. And as you heard at the beginning of this live, she lived on the ground floor. See, you don't know people. She would have taken a chance either way. If she'd have let the 3 guys come to her apartment with her girlfriend in tow, how would that have worked out? 3 guys and 2 girls. Somebody would have been offended and left out. There's no 3rd girl. See, you don't know people. So she invites a guy who she's dated in the past over, and he brings a friend because she's thinking her friend's going to stay. So this is why I said this story sounds weird, because in the beginning, she leaves the club with her friend, thinking her friend's going to go along with coming over to the apartment after they pick up her child. So they pick up the child for the babysitter, but she drops Aaron off. This is where the story is very strange to me. So what I am so confused about is, why did Shanae not call the guy, Mr. Piper, to say, hey, change of plans. My girlfriend will not be joining us. She didn't want to come over, so don't bring your friend. This is where I don't understand the story. Because as I said, 2012, we had cell phones. We had landlines. So why didn't she call the guy to tell him, don't bring your friend? My friend changed her mind. She doesn't want to come over. So don't bring your friend. Because one would have to say, what? He brought his friend anyway. She told him, don't bring him. He came with him anyway. What was going on? Was there some facetiousness on part of the guy, Piper, although he's been cleared? But it's just a strange story that a guy going to go get him some and bring his friend, but there's a change of plans of the other girl not showing up. That's just awkward. One guy goes to the back room to have sexual relations, and another one sits in the living room and waits. So you know he probably was feeling some type of way, obviously. Oh, he done brought me all the way over here. The other girl's not here for me. Now I got to sit here bored and listen to 2 people have sex. And I'm not getting me anything. So he steals the girl's car and goes somewhere. Returns once he sees his friend is gone. The friend said he waited 20 minutes. KB was gone. How long did these 2 know each other, Mr. Piper and KB? Because you see, the KB does not resemble the actual initials of Mr. McGowan's name. How long did they know each other? Where did they meet? Because you see, now you have to factor in, he brought a felon burglar to a girl's house who later stole her keys while he's in the room having sex with her, and returns to sexually assault her, strangle her, suffocate her, beat her, whatever, and set her on fire, set the apartment on fire. Now imagine living with that. You took a stranger to another stranger's home. And you went in the back room to have sex while your acquaintance is up front, obviously pissed off. And that stranger steals the other stranger's keys and lies in wait till you leave to double back, to sexually assault, kill this lady and set her on fire, with a small child also in the apartment who survived the fire by an upstairs neighbor who was a firefighter. Amen. How many crimes had this guy committed before the murder of Shanae? The fact he showed no remorse in court, obviously made some derogatory comments during the court, while these people have given statements, impact statements, her family, friends, he decides to douse them with gasoline and basically tell him he didn't have any regrets killing her. A sadist, rapist, thief, arsonist. So you don't know people. This Piper guy brought this machine to this girl's house and didn't know what he had brought in there, that he was dealing with a diabolical mind. Or did he know? Would he ever tell the truth? That, yeah, I know he was off. I knew something was wrong with him, but I hung with him anyway. So that's why I said, how long did Piper know Mr. McLeod? How often did they hang with each other? Where did he meet him? And just imagine a young woman thinking she's just going to be having sex for the evening with some guy she liked, interested in, whatever the arrangement was, and then go to sleep thinking everything's okay. I've locked my door, I'm good. But little do you know, the person who was waiting in the living room stole your car keys and double back to assault you, then murder you, and leave your child to fend for himself in a burning inferno. That's cruel. And the fact that he would go in the courtroom and say derogatory comments about not having remorse, wanting to denounce the plea deal. He was forced into giving the plea, but then once he realized they couldn't contact his lawyer, the district attorney, he decided to just go ahead, take the sentence that was dealt to him. You see, I tell you this all the time, you don't know people. And young people, you have to be very careful of the company you keep. And even when you're older, you have to be careful of the company you keep because you do not know people. My best advice to you is don't bring nobody back to the house or apartment. Sad to say, but that is just the way it is. Because you take a chance on anybody coming back, going on a blind date to bring them back to your apartment, house, you don't know what they have in mind, as I call them funny games. It's a light-hearted terminology, but if you've ever seen the movie, the games are not actually funny. They're horrendous because the intent is to make you suffer before killing you. So these is what I call funny games. Meet a guy online, could be a woman too. He shows up at the door, but like they say, you don't know who's going to actually be at the door because you could be bum rushed by another guy. How are you going to fight off two guys, more guys? Because you were only expecting one. And naturally, you can be assaulted by the one. So this is why I said I couldn't understand why she would agree to have sex with him, knowing the other guy was waiting in the living room. That would have been very awkward for me as a female. I could not have done that. Because the first thing I would have thought, whether I had dated Piper before, had sex with him before, I would think, okay, this ain't good having two men in the apartment, alcohol, drinks, blah, 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 hanky-panky. Hell no. But when you're young, you make mistakes, drastic mistakes, sadly. And this is what cost her life. Him coming there, bringing that guy there. who left out of there with her keys and then returned to kill her. So I also wonder, how does Mr. Piper feel knowing he brought that monster into that apartment who ended up killing that young lady that he just had sex with? That's a hell of a burden to carry around. So my advice to young women is to be careful meeting and greeting men. Don't let anybody bring another party to your house. If you want to have drinks, movie night or something, let it be a barrage of people in your house. And never leave your keys out on the table, counter, at the door. Always take your keys and put them up in your room. Wallet, ID, said things, as not to compromise your safety, your identity. It's a very weird story. And I'm sure everybody may have a little different account of that night, who said what to whom. But in the end, Shanae should have called that young man and told him, my girlfriend's not going to be here, so you can't bring your guy friend. And perhaps she'd be alive today had she called him and told him her girlfriend was not going to be there. So there would have been no reason for him to bring this KB alias person. Now, who's to say that she didn't call him, tell him, hey, she's not coming? And he brought him any damn way. See, that's why I said you don't really know the mindset of people. Because you heard this narcissist say, oh, she had sex with both of us. But Mr. Piper used a condom, so his DNA wouldn't be inside of the young lady. And his DNA, the suspect's, was on her person. And I thought that was interesting due to the fact that she was burned. But naturally, he couldn't dismantle DNA from inside of the victim. So what was it that was on the seat in the car that he cut out and threw bleach on her car seat? Did he burn himself in the apartment? Cut himself, hurt himself, bled? He got in her car, leaving remnants from the apartment, gasoline, blood. Was something. Because something led him to the store to go buy an X-Acto knife to cut that seat. So I'm curious to what it is that he left behind. Very sick story. If you want to watch the entire episode, it's running on the Oxygen Network. I want to thank you all for joining me. Hope you all had a wonderful weekend. God bless all of you. Stay safe this week. I will be back here shortly with commentary pertaining to Vicky White and Casey White, who are still on the run. We're going to chop up the situation with the sheriff and the jail and the protocol and how the lax behavior led to this infamous so-called breakout of a jailer and an inmate. What went wrong in that jail down in Alabama? We're going to chop it up, dissect. Who did what? Who didn't do what? What was said, not said? Who knew of these people's behaviors? And nothing was done, obviously. If you'd like to donate to the channel, $ Big Angie, 129 Cash App. All super chats and stickers are welcome during my lives. Thank you, Kathy, so much. God bless all of you. Stay safe. This is Crime Vault. You're welcome, sweetie.